everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of the Voice podcast series. Today's topic is tools for wellness, balancing mental health and mechanical contracting. So before I get to today's guests, I just want to start off today's episode with noting that this is a particularly important topic we are addressing today, and it may be activating for some as we are addressing mental health and the resources available to support you. If you or someone you know needs immediate assistance, the National Suicide Crisis Hotline is available 24/7 at 988. So to get started with today's podcast, I'm going to pass it off to our guests to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start off with Alana Marklund, who is the National Manager of Youth Diversity and Indigenous Relations at UA Canada. Alana, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited to have you back. So if you just want to start off by saying, more about what your role entails and a little bit about yourself for our guests listening today.
Thanks, Rachel. I really appreciate it and happy to be back with you. It's always such a great conversation. So I'm Alana Marklund. I work for UA Canada as a special rep for Youth Diversity and Indigenous Relations. I've also really been working very closely on all of our mental health programs and really trying to break the stigma surrounding mental health, especially in the construction industry. I'm a red steel welder by trade is where I started in the industry. I was also a welding instructor for some time and just have a really big passion behind the skilled trades and really trying to make it as, and when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, mental health is part of that. And when we're talking about safety, mental health is part of that. And I'm just really incredibly proud to be able to have this as one of our main focuses going forward. So thank you for having me. Really excited.
Awesome. Thanks for coming back, Alana. And then we have Coralee Beatty, who's new to the podcast, but is a familiar face with MCAC as she's hosted some webinars for us in the past. So Coralee, I'll pass it on to you to let us know a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, thanks. So I've been in the construction industry for over 25 years, probably 27 or 28 now. And I started as a building envelope consultant on sites, doing work there. And I had a mechanical contracting business for 15 years that I sold probably just over 6 years ago. And after selling our business, I was kind of on a path to figure out what I wanted to do next. And as my journey has evolved, what I'm doing now is really focusing on training and consulting within the construction industry, because I love this industry. Like Alana said, I'm very passionate about the people in our industry and making this a more welcoming place to be. And through my experience, what I've seen as an employer, as a colleague, as many different roles in this industry, I see the need as a parent of somebody in this industry. I see the need for us to focus on our people a little bit more. And I think the mental health is obviously something that's at the forefront of a significant crisis that we have right now. So I'm doing whatever I can to contribute to those solutions and help the people to be, healthier in our industry.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Coralee, for being here today. And so just to get us started, I want to get in just about your own personal journeys in the mechanical contracting industry and how mental health has played a role in your career. So Alana, I know you start off on the tools and, it's no surprising news, being a female on the tools and stuff has its own challenges. And, one of those not directly can relate to mental health. So do you mind sharing a bit about your journey and how, mental health has played a role in your career so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think mental health, and I know mental health is really just as important as our physical health, right? It really did play a major role in my career. Physically speaking, right? I had to gain strength. I'm using a grinder and welding and auger positions, heavy lifting, all that stuff, right? Is way more physically demanding than my previous desk job was. But it's the same with mental health, right? Construction, it's a very male dominated industry, and it's one where you have this feeling like you don't want to show weakness, right? And not to say that I was a weak by any means, but I always used to be so concerned about what people thought about me, so worried that I would mess up or do something wrong, worried they wouldn't like me, or they wouldn't think I'd fit very long in this trade if I was showing that emotional side. So in a way, exactly, in a way, going into the trade really toughened me up mentally, I think, to try and fit into the environment. But there were definitely days that were hard, right? And I felt like sometimes I just couldn't show what I was going through for fear that someone, might like think less of me, or I'm not tough enough to make it in the trade. So that stigma is really there, and I think honestly, it's the self stigma that we put on ourselves that really stop us from reaching out. So I think that I really couldn't hide the fact that I was an empathetic person, right? So although I tried to, I tried not to show that so-called, which I don't think is weakness, but that so-called weakness, right? That it stopped me from opening up. But I think that part of me just really wanted to show that I wanted to help others feel heard and show that it's okay if they can come to me. And so there's actually a stat out there, I believe it's through the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Canada, that say that 75% of people are actually afraid to disclose to their employer or other employees about having a mental health condition. But however, 76% of people said they would support somebody who came to them with a mental health condition, right? So to me, it shows that there is a ton of support available. And it's a lot of the stigma that we put on ourselves, right? The people that we're working with really are there to support us. It's just we don't feel we're able to stand up and say something, right? Just for an example, while working with fellow tradespeople, I was speaking with a coworker that was going through a really tough time. We were having a pretty open discussion, but they never mentioned that they'd ever reached out for help before. And as we were talking, I said, I've actually been through a really similar situation, and I really struggled. And what I did is I reached out through help through a member assistance program. Hoping that perhaps maybe mentioning it would be a good way to help them out. But I was very pleasantly surprised that they actually were like, well, actually, I have reached out and I've been speaking to a counselor. And I thought, but it wasn't until I mentioned that I'd used it that this person had felt comfortable enough to tell me that they'd been using it as well, right? So I think that when we have these open conversations and we're able to be just a little bit vulnerable and not put that shame and that stigma on reaching out for help, it's really part of taking care of our own mental health and breaking that and know that it's okay. Not everybody's, all fine and dandy. Sometimes we need to reach out for a little bit of advice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you raised some really good points, Lana, that I'm going to come back to, especially around, the culture that the trades has with mental health. So thanks so much for sharing that. Coralee, anything you wanted to share regarding how mental health has played a role in your career?
Well, I just want to kind of speak to the point that Alana was saying with regards to vulnerability and thinking that we're the only ones that are suffering, because exactly, what you were saying is exactly my story too. Just feeling like I couldn't very well allow myself to be weak. I saw that as a weakness as well. Like being vulnerable was a weakness. Anybody that I saw showing any kind of vulnerability, I thought they were weak. And that was something that was in my head. And it wasn't until I don't know, many years in the industry where I experienced something where I didn't have a choice but to be vulnerable. Now, it wasn't on site, it was in my life, and there was a lot going on, and I never asked for help. I would not even ask a neighbor to watch my kids. I never asked for help because it's kind of like, this is my life that I built and I need to sort it out and figure it out. And so asking for help for me from anybody, whether it be my neighbor, my mother, certainly not my employer or any coworkers, until I was put in a position where everything was going sideways. And I was in a position where I needed to ask my neighbor to watch my kids for like 10 minutes while I ran down the hill and took care of something. And she was like, of course I can do that. She was happy for me to actually ask her for help. And I think that is part of, it's the other side of it, where we are so resistant to asking for help. It's like people want to help. Exactly what you said, Alana, about, 76% of people will be willing to and happy to support somebody coming to them. And I think that's what we don't understand, is that we see it from our own perspective, which is, I'm weak, I can't cope, I can't do these things, I'm a failure. And it's just not that way. We are all suffering. Alana, you said a lot of people are. I think everybody is suffering. We just have a different, it's a huge range of suffering. Everybody has something that they're dealing with. So for me, it was, when I was on sites and I was sort of my role at the time when I was on construction sites was more of an authority figure. I was like a consultant that, everybody kind of turned their back when I walked on site. And being a young woman, I needed to, figure out how I was going to have the authority to help move this project in the direction I needed it to move, while maintaining or building respect with the people I need to be working with. And my experience on site was mostly very good. Like, I know that they talk behind my back. I saw little love notes on the walls when I came to site. Would be like, not it'd be nasty. I'm like, oh, I know that that's for me because I'm the only female that's on site. At the same time, like, my experience on site was relatively positive. It was when I was a business owner that it was the people that worked for me that I saw suffering. And I also had people close in my life that were suffering. And that's where I recognize how I want to help. It's that wanting to help and knowing that there's only so much that I can do. Like, what can I do to serve you? What can I do to make this easier on you? How can I support you and be there? It's all I could do. And it was hard because I'm somebody who likes to take control and get things done and, take care of problems. I'm a solutions person. And when I didn't have those solutions that I could just impose on somebody, here, now you're fixed. It was very difficult. So that's part of the reason why I do what I do. And I think that it's these conversations, I think, are just great to have whenever we can.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Coralee. And yeah, just to kind of go off that, and you all kind of touched on just about the culture of mechanical contracting, or just the trades in general. And fortunately, the industry does have like a negative impact on mental health a little bit, and that's the way it was, and we're trying to move away from it. But Coralee, what are some of the other negative how the industry is being shown negatively when it comes to mental health?
I think that, and maybe I'm too close to it. I don't know. I mean, I don't, like, to be very honest, my son, who's only just 18, so he is not somebody who comes home and finds, his coping in a bottle or other things, so he's not there. But, there's not too many people that I know in the industry that are active on site, or whether they're running a project or, they're actively doing the project, boots on the ground, whatever it happens to be. There's not many that I know that are not coping or helping themselves get through the end of their day and into the next day without some sort of self-medicating. And I think that not only is that a reputation we have, but it's a reputation because it's very prevalent. Like, it is a problem that people are suffering and they go home and they self-medicate in whatever way that is, whether it's with different substances or, playing video games or gambling, whatever that is their coping mechanism. And I think this, like, for me, in my experience and what I've seen, is that the place where our industry is exacerbating that, because I don't think necessarily the industry is the cause of that. I mean, there's so much to this topic. I think where our industry exacerbates the problem is that we don't have good leaders. And whether that is a crew leader, a site leader, an office leader, like, at every level, we have people that are too stressed out. They're under pressure from budgets and scopes and schedules. And there's just so much pressure. And the people are not the priority. The project, the profits are the priorities. Yeah. And I think that that's where we fail our people, is that in our leadership does not know how to take care of their people properly. And I don't think it's for a lack of wanting necessarily. That's certainly out there. I think it's more so a lack of understanding what the people need. And then also a lack of time. Like, so many people are just, like, at capacity. There is no more that they can take. They're beyond capacity. Like, how to find the time to figure out how to tend to their people is just not there. So I think that there's a lot of issues within our industry that just make the problem worse, that may already exist as people come into the industry, and it just kind of explodes. It's just the pressure and the pressure to perform is really what it comes down to. And then just, when you have somebody, say, whether it be your foreman or your foreperson or your site supervisor, whatever it happens to be, and their way of managing or leading is by yelling, and freaking out and snapping when things don't go right, that just trickles down. And that is just, nobody thrives in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think just the nature of the industry, like, it's a numbers industry. There's a budget, there's a timeline. there's that like hard timeline on paper, and but people don't realize there's the people who have to deal with that timeline. And no, I couldn't agree more. Anything you wanted to add, Alana, about just some of the negativity in the culture of the industry that you've seen?
Yeah, like I think if we are talking about some of the negative aspects that might contribute to somebody's mental health, I think keeping in mind this is obviously very situational based, but there are a few factors that skilled tradespeople face in an industry that does take a toll on your mental health. I mean, we're looking at long hours, long commutes. We've got time away from family, friends, your social circles as well, right? That can be really detrimental to people's health if they don't have that support around them, right? So that can lead to depression, anxiety, sadness, irritability. So like, especially when we start looking into camp environments, especially too, right? Don't forget the mentality. I'm sure we've all heard work hard, play hard. That exists as well, right? It's a labor intensive job, right? So we run into people with injuries, getting long-term pain, chronic conditions. And much of the time, because of the nature of the work, we're treated with opioids or painkillers because we might not be able to take time off to actually properly heal the injury that we're dealing with, right? So that's a whole nother thing in itself, right? If we're like, as Coralee mentioned, we're masking pain or sadness or depression, whatever it might be, with medication that could be potentially dangerous, right? So if we're taking too much time off of work to heal ourselves, maybe we're getting ourselves into financial worry. It's a snowball effect, right? You have people feeling burdened by it. So these injuries, musculoskeletal injuries especially, when they're treated with opioids, can lead to substance use issues. And that's a whole nother part of this, of when we're talking about mental health, right? We've got fatigue, job instability, all those things. But when we look at all of the negatives, I'm also really happy that we are seeing some positive movement in here, right? So for over the last number of years, I think our entire industry has been putting an emphasis on the importance of mental health. We've all made multiple strides, right? Creating more psychologically safe workplaces for everybody. Many of our unions and our contractors, they all offer mental health benefits now, right? I shouldn't say all, but quite a few of them do. I know with our unions, we have them part of our health and welfare packages. We've got resources available to members and their families across the country. And I really think that having us all work together collaboratively on this just helps everybody, right? So we might have those long hours and long commutes sometimes, but we also get the opportunity to work with really great friends and colleagues, right?
Yeah.
So that's some of the good, right? Sometimes we do spend more time with the people we work with than we do our own families, right? So when we work with good people, they can also become a support system without even realizing it. So the fact that we get to work in this environment can be incredibly rewarding, even though we know there's lots of pressure. When you give a job well done, it's really satisfying, right? So I do believe that, yes, our industry does have some negative effects on mental health, but it's all in how we approach it as a whole, right? When the industry is showing it's supporting people, no matter what they're encountering in their life, if we have the opportunity to break that stigma about mental health and ensure mental health is on the forefront, I really think, and we're seeing it, it's going to make a difference.
For sure. And yeah, I'm so glad you touched on the positive, Alana, because, this meant to be educational, but also, hoping to attract, people into the industry. And, there's obviously some great associations and the industry, with MCA Canada doing, topics like this. And I know you in Canada has definitely been on the forefront of, pushing, resources for mental health. And Coralee, anything you've seen on your end? Because I know you work with a different variety of contractors and association. Any positive cultural things you've seen in our industry that you wanted to share?
I would hope so.
Otherwise, I know, right?
That I would, yes. I do see that leaders are more interested. They are, asking some questions. They are doing some things that they can to help improve the situation. So I think that the fact that more people are acknowledging the fact that this exists, that they are kind of starting to recognize that our mental health is as important as our physical health, and starting to see the balance between the two, and that they're both necessary. So I do see a shift for sure. And I think there's still, a long way to go, but I think we're all kind of on the way to getting there, especially when, like I said, when we have these conversations. One of the things that's interesting as well that you were saying, Alana, about, taking time off and feeling that pressure financially. And I remember when I was employed, and I was an employer in like private sector, not within union. And we had an employee that was often hurt. He had a weak back. I mean, he was very strong. He was somebody who worked out all the time. His core, he had a problem with his core, had a problem with his back. And it was just be like, every 6 or 8 months, he would be out for like weeks. And it was like, we supported our people 100%. Of course, we didn't want them working when they were in pain. And at the same time, when you were in a smaller business, we had, 18, 20 kind of people. It's like every person is needed. And so I know that he felt pressure, like as much as I supported him, in my eyes, just say, okay, what are we going to do without him? What are we going to do without him? And I know that he felt that. So there's also, even unintentionally there, like for us, it was certainly unintentional, because we wanted to support him. And at the same time, there's, the employers that are out there that are like, well, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? Like, so there's that pressure as well. And the pressure they put on themselves to not be out for too long. So it is hard to allow them to take, whether it be financial or, that personal wanting to serve, wanting to be back in the job. Just take the time, because your body needs to heal if it's going to be able to continue to get stronger.
Yeah. Definitely. Sometimes some of it's so out of your control, right? And it's difficult to navigate. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. So we've been talking about, the culture and those who are in the industry, but again, a big part of this is attracting those in the industry. So is there any advice you would give to someone of how they could help to maintain their mental well-being being in this industry? Because, I think a big thing we've been talking about is just there's been a long history of the trades and a misconception of how it is, like you said, it's like a boys club. You have to be tough to enter it. So it defers a lot of people away from entering it. So is there any advice you would give to someone of why they should enter this industry and how best to keep their mental health while being in it? Coralee, we can start with you if you want.
It's so easy to say self-care. It's so easy to say, work-life balance. It's
take a bubble bath.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, I know when I was, active on site, and when I had a business and I was running and all of the things, when my life was fully encapsulated with everything to do with work, I never had time to consider self-care. I just didn't, whether it was because I was a mom and I had 4 young kids to be taken care of first, and then a husband that I needed to track, and, all of my employees. There was so much going on that for me to take a minute and think about myself just never happened. And I'm here to say, you need to make that happen. You need to. And it comes down, especially for us women, where, we don't value ourselves enough to put ourselves first. And what we need to understand is we are being selfish by serving other people first all the time, because we are not filling our own buckets. We are pouring from an empty cup, whatever analogy you want to use. We are empty and can't give anymore. When we take care of ourselves, whether it be a nap, because I know for me, I just need 12 minutes. Like, give me 12 minutes and I am functional again. Whether it be like a quick nap or, a hot bath, or writing in a journal, going for a walk, breathing, like just taking some, deep breaths, like whatever you can do in the beginning, just do something that serves you, because you put yourself in a position to just have a little bit more energy to give back. And I think that when you are caught in a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or whatever it is, allow yourself, like it just takes 90 seconds of breathing, like just stopping 90 seconds to change your situation, the way you're thinking, the way you're feeling. So if you can just stop for that 90 seconds and allow yourself to respond and not react from an emotional perspective, I think that you're only serving yourself. So I know it's hard. I was in it. And I shall say that I started doing this, like I started meditating in the mornings before I sold my business. So this was something I did implement. And I started going to yoga class at 10. There was a yoga class, 10 o'clock in the morning. As an employer, it was hard for me to not feel guilty leaving. But at the same time, it's just like, I got to go do this for myself. So I think that where you can find the time, if it's at the end of your day, if you're an employee and you're kind of stuck to that schedule, just make yourself do it. I always tell people to take your feelings out of the things you do and just do what is best for you. Because when we don't feel like it in the moment, like, oh, I'm not going to go do it, I'm too tired, I just don't feel like it, you're not going to do the things that serve you. So if you say at the end of today, I'm just going to go to the yoga class, it's got a 4:30 class, I'm just going to go, and then you do it even when you don't feel like it, you'll feel better afterwards, and you'll be so grateful that you did it. I think that's huge. So I'm going to say that it's self-care and setting a few boundaries, which I'm sure that's a whole other thing, but I'll just leave it at self-care.
Yeah, yes. I know. I love that. I don't realize how much it actually, like, even just going for a walk or a little jog or something, like how connected you are physically and mentally. Like if you're feeling that stress inside your head, you can go for a run or a workout or something, and you never realize how much of a difference it makes. But
and it can be very short. That's the thing.
Yeah.
People think, oh, it takes all this time. It doesn't. Like just break the cycle of what you're sitting in, like just 2 minutes. But yeah, go
grounding.
ahead.
It's great.
Yeah.
I think if I was to give one advice, starting like in the mechanical industry, for me, it would be getting familiar with some of the resources out there that are available to you and not being afraid to use them, right? So some of them are incredibly helpful, right? So what I would do if I'm fresh in there is keep an eye on your own mental health. It can be stressful starting in a new industry like that. It's something that might be very different. Try to pick up on any signs or symptoms that you might notice. However, if you're watching your own mental health, sometimes you fall into that distress. Your vision can actually become clouded with how you're really feeling, and we can't quite pick up on it ourselves, right? So I've fallen into this zone before without even realizing it. And it took somebody else to say to me, like, Alana, you're just not yourself lately. I'm getting really worried about you. It was a time in my life where there was quite a bit of change, and I almost just felt like a shell of a person, right? But I didn't really realize how deeply I was affected until somebody pointed it out to me, right? So I was really glad that when someone brought it to my attention, I knew the resources that I had available so that I could reach out and get the help that I needed at that time. And the same thing goes if you notice those symptoms, being open and to be able to openly, compassionately tell somebody that, right? So having an open mind and accepting if someone you're close with does come up and ask you if you're okay, they might see signs in you that you're not your typical happy self, or perhaps you're angrier than you were before, right? Sometimes others do notice that, but change in behavior before we do. So if you know those resources and you see somebody else who's struggling, you can share them with them, right? You can recommend those resources to them, to someone who might be in mental distress and not really realize it. So like regardless of where you work, I think knowing those resources is huge. Because there is a mental health and crisis suicide hotline that's available in Canada. I know we've mentioned it. We're going to share the resources for it, but it's 988, right? So it's open to everybody in Canada and the US to use. It's easy. You can call it, you can text it. There's online as well. They're very quick to answer. There's a few quick prompts like French or English, like 2 other specific little prompts to go through, and you'll be speaking with a real live person who's a mental health and suicide crisis intervention specialist, right? So they'll be able to provide you with additional resources. Another thing that's important to know about this number is that even if you're not using it for you can use it for somebody you're with, or use it for advice to help somebody, right? So anybody can call it at any time. This number has been I shouldn't say this number, but this service has been in Canada for a very long time. It just used to be a long 1-800 number, but they put it down to 988 to make it so much easier for people to remember, right? So, I mean, I even got sticker on my phone, like, it makes it nice and easy to remember, and people see it, and it grabs their attention, right? We all know 911, which can also be used in a mental health crisis if it's at that zone. But 988 is another great resource to use. And I think knowing that that's available and through your contractor or through your union, if you have resources, know what they are, because you never know when you're actually going to have to use them.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Alana. It's kind of going to another question we have that I'm going to skip ahead to, is just, Coralee, how important do you think it is for people to address, when they see mental health? Because, I know me particularly, and it's just, you're told like, oh, that's like their problem. They're an adult. They can deal with it. If they like need my help, they'll ask me. But like, how important is that for like, if you see a colleague, having like a little bit of stress or like showing some mental health symptoms, like how important do you think that is to address it and, be an ally and support to them?
There's nothing more important because it comes back to being in that moment. And when you are in the state where you are feeling the stress, feeling the pressure, feeling the anxiety, the depression, whatever it happens to be, you don't recognize it. Like you don't. All you are so focused on is what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And it gets in your head. And to have somebody be able to be the source that you need, that just kind of breaks that. So like kind of snaps you out of those feelings just by asking you a question. And it doesn't have to be any great long conversation. It doesn't have to be, invasive into their personal life. You're just like, hey, how you doing today? Like, just like, or you can say, hey, can I grab you some water? Like just something to bring them to a connection, because that's what people need. People need to feel like they're connected. And when somebody sees them, like, hey, can I get you some water? Like, especially like Alana was saying, hot days, long days outside, hard work. Some people get, dehydrated. It's a simple way to just get somebody's attention when they might be in a state of, not a good state in their head. And it just something to connect, to communicate, to break the thought cycle that they might be currently in. And even if it's something that's not like immediately an issue, just, as, Alana was saying, like as people change their behaviors, or you see that they're kind of declining over days or weeks, or they're just not doing as well, it's just reaching out and connecting and saying, you don't even necessarily have to acknowledge that you've noticed anything. And you can just have to ask the question, hey, how you been doing? So anything changed for you? Like, you can say, I've noticed that you're not moving as quickly as you usually do, because, oftentimes people become less productive and they aren't as focused, and some things like that you could be seeing, that kind of, maybe they're not sleeping, they're extra tired, whatever it happens to be. And just bringing that, asking the question, so that they might go, oh, yeah, I guess I have been a little bit slower lately, or I have been more tired lately. I'm not sleeping well. However you start that conversation, and just say, because the other thing is like what we're going back to that first part of the conversation where we were talking about, people not wanting to ask for help, not knowing. The other part of that is not knowing the help that they need. So I think oftentimes, Alana, a really great point about, using 988 or even 911 for that matter, and being able to be with somebody and help them make the call, offering a specific way of helping, instead of, can I help you in some way? Say, can I make a phone call for you? Can I do, like, be very specific, because when you say, hey, how can I help you? People are like, no, don't worry about it. I don't know. But if you can offer a specific way that you suggest that you can help, then they're more willing to take you up on that, because they're like, yes, I could use that.
Yeah, because you're not putting another task in their hands, right? Now I need to help me.
Like, oh God, now I'm overwhelmed.
Yes,
exactly. I'm already up to here, and now I gotta make a phone call. Yeah, no, that's great, for sure. And then, Alana, what role and what do you like to see, like, employers and leaders in the industry? What role would you like to see them play in promoting mental health awareness and support? Because we talked about, the colleague relationship and stuff, but, at the end of the day, it comes down to the employers and the leaders in the industry too. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, I believe like employers, leaders, supervision, fellow employees, everybody has a very large role to play in promoting mental health and wellness, right? We're talking supervisors, HR, company values, the journey persons. Everybody honestly has an incredibly important role to play, to set the tone of the environment, right? These roles, especially when we're talking supervision, HR, company values, et cetera, can make or break a psychologically safe workplace, right? So if you, I'll just, for an example, right? If you have an apprentice that's really struggling with maybe depression or severe anxiety, what if they go to their supervisor and ask for a couple days off to seek treatment? If the supervisor says to them, if you take that many days off, we're just going to have to let you go because the work needs to get done, right?
Yes.
We talked productivity earlier. We talked about being, and that's
Yeah.
important. Obviously, we need to get the work done. But if with that kind of response, that person might not feel very supported, right? It won't take much drive for them, even if they take the time off. Are they gonna want to come back, right? We're talking retention here too. So if you have a leadership, whoever's making that decision, if you have the leadership that supports them and can make reasonable accommodation, right, without causing undue hardship, obviously, to get that person the help they need, that apprentice is so much more likely to want to come back and stay with that company, right? Once they get back to feeling better. So it's all about people supporting people, human to human empathy and compassion, right? People who feel appreciated are going to want to remain committed to want to stay and work there, right? I mean, bear in mind, obviously, there's plenty of scenarios that can go around, but generally speaking, of course, everybody on the job site has a role in contributing to that psychological safety, and just supporting a workplace or whether it be in a school or a union, whatnot. When people are treated with respect, compassion, and empathy, they're committed, right? And I think that's how we keep people, retrain and recruit people.
Yeah, I definitely think it starts from the top down. If creating a positive workplace and stuff, and also just being proactive. I think hopefully it doesn't. I know for me when I first entered into the workforce, I was so scared to ask for time off, or when I needed just a day. You're like, oh my god, and now I think. I know with like my job, especially like bosses and leaders are being so much more well trained that the culture is just better from the start, which I think is such a great help. For now, I'm like, okay, I'm having a day, like I just need a break, and I call and they're like, yeah, go the hell home. Excuse my language. Like, get out of here. Like, we don't like you need to like take your time, right? Like we don't care.
Yeah.
So that's great. Anything you wanted to add to that, Coralee, about the leaderships and how they can play a role in helping with mental health in the workplace?
Absolutely, because this is kind of the place where I love to I do people development, and part of that is leadership development, and it's in an effort to serve the people. And like you said, Rachel, it does start from the top down. You can't, as a leader, you cannot hire middle management or a site foreman or site foreperson. You can't hire somebody to care. You need to care first. And because that shows up, people know it. And top down, absolutely. And it doesn't take much. Like it is, it doesn't have to cost money. And I think that is one of the misconceptions, is that, providing training or the mental health, taking care of the mental health piece has to cost money. And it just doesn't. You can connect with your people by saying, hey, how's it going? How is your day? Just actually treating them like a person and not just, a person on a site that's going to make you money. Like actually treat them like the human that they are and be engaged. And I think that when you can be engaged with your people and show that you care, and one of the things that I always encourage leaders to do is have understand what the goals and dreams and aspirations are of your people. Because there's two things. One, a lot of people in our industry don't give themselves the permission to have aspirations and dreams and big goals that they want to go for. And as their leader, if you can give them the permission to push the boundaries of what they want for their own life, I think that in itself, it's exciting for people. And if you show interest in what are your hopes and dreams and how can I help you through my employment of you get there? Like, I think that that's huge, because people then will have something, and maybe it's something within work, like maybe they want to get to a certain role within the company that they work for, or maybe it's something like maybe they want to do, go on a big trip, whatever it is that they want to do. If you can show how you can help them get there, they will be more excited about working. They will be more engaged. They'll be more productive. They will be happy to be there. All of the things. And that does not cost you money. It might cost you the time to have an hour conversation to, talk to them and figure out what they want and how you're going to get them there. That's it. It's not a huge investment. And the ROI on that is enormous.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure there's people, listening right now, hopefully who see you two talking and where you started to be like, oh my goodness, if I joined the trades, and like, there's like positive stories. And yeah, I think that's a great point. Just, how how much great this industry is and how it supports you to come to these great jobs and careers. So that's awesome. So we're just coming to the end. I can't believe we've already been talking for almost 40 minutes now. It's great. It's a great conversation. And obviously, there's a lot more that we want to get to, but just to kind of wrap things up, is there anything that you hope listeners take away from our discussion today about mental health in the mechanical contracting industry? Alana, I'll start with you if that's okay. If there's like one or two like takeaways you really want to hone in on.
Takeaways.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
I know,
I really think that education, right? Education's key. It's an important way to break the stigma around mental health, right? The more we can understand, we'll never ever be able to walk in somebody else's shoes, but I think what's really important is that we can try to at least walk beside them, right? Be a support system for people when they are dealing with mental health conditions, but also know that if somebody does come to you in crisis, or somebody that's having trouble, that doesn't mean you have to be their therapist. It doesn't mean you have to be their counselor. Just being there basically as an active listener. And I think that's something that we can all practice, right? If you've managed to start the conversation with somebody, or, someone comes to you, whatever it might be, if you're talking with somebody who is clearly going through something, practice active listening, right? To me, that's what's incredibly important. It's what's really helps break that stigma, because somebody feels heard, right? So practicing that, when you listen to somebody talking, make sure that you're trying to understand what they're saying, as opposed to listening to respond about what they're saying, right? Sometimes really that's all it takes is just somebody listening. We all do it, right? We listen like, what am I going to say next? How am I going to follow that up? But instead of that, listening and trying to take in what they're actually saying, because sometimes that's all somebody really needs, is somebody just to hear them out. What are they trying to say? And don't be afraid of that conversation, right? Like, if you shy away from it, if someone's coming to you and opening up to you, just lead with empathy, compassion, be an active listener, and just be there to help them, point them to resources that they might need, right? And just break that stigma, not make them feel shame about coming to you. I think that's one of the most important things for me.
Awesome. Anything you want to add, Coralee?
Yeah, I think that is such a good point. And I think when you say where people don't be afraid of the conversation, you don't have to respond, because I think part of the reason why people are afraid to get into those or be open to receiving the conversation is because they don't know what to say. And you don't have to say anything. It's just, is there anything else? Did you want to say anything else? Can I listen to you more? It doesn't have to be some, huge response that fixes them. It just, like you said, be the ears and just listen.
Yeah.
One of the things is that I think one of the things I'd like to leave the listeners with is the other side of that, which is you're not alone. If you are the one that is suffering, everybody is suffering in some way, everybody. And you're not alone. And to reach out is not weak. To reach out is actually the strong, that it takes strength. Absolutely. It takes bravery. It takes courage just to ask for help. And it's where we see it as a weakness in ourselves. It's just, it's the opposite. Recognize that that's where your strength is. And everybody is suffering. It just... You're not alone. I think that that's the biggest thing. We always, I think a lot of people just feel so isolated and think that they are the ones that are suffering. And just reach out, just ask the question, and everybody. Yeah. And I think that understand that people want to help. Yeah. People want to help you.
Yes, for sure.
Like, our industry is made up of tough, strong, people. We're proud of that. We should be proud of that, but the pride in that should come from us being strong enough to help others, strong enough for us to reach out for help ourselves when we need it. And you're right, it should never be looked at. Our strength comes from being united to help each other, and just lead with human compassion, right? We're all human. I don't think we need to feel shame in that whatsoever. So
well said.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I think that was a great conversation, and I think it was a great start of a conversation, hopefully for a lot of people listening. So yeah, again, thank you both. We're encouraging those listening today to, have those conversations, take these takeaways back to their workplace, and just a reminder that MCA Canada, I have the little kind of sticker there that they have these stickers as well, similar to the one Alana had on her phone. So if you're interested in getting those for your company, if you're a member of MCA, CWMC, please contact us. We'd love to provide those and other resources. And just a reminder that we are on YouTube now, so please subscribe to our podcast. But other than that, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you all come back again soon.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks for
Coralee.
all the hard work you're all doing on mental health. This is it's going to change
You both
lives.
as well. Yeah, for sure.